there was a recent study done by a company called GolfTech in the States, and they measured lots of different golfers and found what was essentially the 5 biggest errors that golfers make in their swing. So I thought it'd be quite good to go through each of them and maybe put my little spin on it as well, just to give you a bit of an idea. So the number one fault that came out was how the player's hips move in the backswing. What they noticed is that a tremendous amount of golfers would have too much sway to the right in the backswing with the hips for the right-handed golfer, whereas at the top of the backswing they found that the better players, let's call them the professionals, the hips had turned somewhat towards the target. Now be careful with that, but I think here the thing to notice is that at the top of the backswing you're not going to see many players whose right hip is considerably further away from the target than it is at address. Now some might do, they'd be players who sort of load up onto their rear post, and we're going to talk about that, but you wouldn't see it excessively, I think is the important thing here. And I think if you're working along the lines that at the top of the backswing that right hip, let's say, is the same distance away from the target as it is at address, then you're not going to be too far wrong. Okay, so you don't really want this right hip being a long way away from the target, or much further away from the target than it is at address. In the same regard, you probably don't want to see that right hip get a lot more towards the target. It's all within reason. So to find out how you should move, simple drill you can do is just to simply take a club, hold a club just above your knees in your posture, and then just simply rotate to the right. Now as you do that, try and make sure the head stays relatively still. Don't want lots of shoulder turn either. So we're just sort of pivoting around. Now what you'll notice as I do this, my left knee just breaks in ever so slightly. So I would be classed what's called a center post player. Now if you do it and you notice that you move this way and your left knee sort of pops out, you would be more of a front post player. So that would mean that you might have a tiny shift to the right in the backswing really early, but then you very quickly start moving back to the left. And you may find also the last one, when you do more of a, which we this move, we really see the way that left knee kicks in. Now what that would mean is really at the top of the swing that right hip may be a little further away from the target than where you started, but not a great deal. It also depends how you're going to use the ground and help you understand how you're going to use the ground on the way down. So let's make sure this right hip, the angle doesn't change a great deal. You can try this test, okay, and find out which post you are. You're either going to be a rear post player, center post player, or a front post player. And then also you can make some swings just holding a club just outside of that right leg, whereby you make some swings and you can see the gap between my leg and the club shaft stays pretty much the same. So that was the first one, the way those hips work in the backswing in the GolfTech study.